Manners. This is R.J. Rushdoony, Easy Chair number 274, September the 1st, 1992. Manners are not very commonly discussed in this generation. When I grew up, of course, they were very strongly stressed. And historically, they have been important whenever a culture has made great steps forward. One of the things that interested me greatly when some years ago I did a great deal of reading in the life of George Washington, and in fact read his collected works, was the fact that as a boy, George Washington copied, word for word, an entire little book on rules for behavior, manners. Unlike others of his day who came from good families, George Washington did not have the opportunity for a good education. He was the son of a second marriage. He had half-brothers older than himself who were going to inherit everything, so that, unlike other Virginians of note, Washington never had the opportunity to travel, to go to Europe, to have all kinds of education at home and abroad. And so he educated himself, self-consciously, and it was his intention to be a Christian gentleman. As a result, he copied every maxim in this book of manners, and apparently memorized them all, because he felt it was so important to his life as a man of character, as a Christian gentleman. All his life he was notable for his courtesy and for his manners. Well, that seems a remote world, but it still existed to World War II, and to a lesser extent through the 50s. The 60s went out of its way to trample underfoot everything connected with that world. But when I was young, it was strongly stressed. I recall once when I was a boy, an incident that had a powerful impact on me. We had as guests in our home a widow and her son who was about 4 years or more older than myself. And my parents were helping them out until she could find some kind of housing. But the boy, Willie, was an absolute stinker. And he finally overstepped himself with me. He went into my stamp collection and took out some stamps he wanted, some choice ones. And I found out just before we sat down at tables. So I came there and told him he was a thief, that he had stolen my stamps. At once my father beckoned to me and took me out to the barn. And he said, until you're ready to behave like a gentleman, you stay here with the cows. But when you're ready, you can come back in. Of course, I had to go back and say I was sorry. And Willie's mother made him return the stamps. That little episode I could reproduce a dozen times over from incidents that took place among the boys I grew up with. Manners were expected of all of us. We got clobbered if we were out of line too far in our behavior. And the boys I'm talking about in this particular context were all farm boys, very good workers with their hands, who had to do a man's job before they were in their teens. But manners were expected of them. And this is now gone. I know that in the 70s, I was insulted a number of times when I automatically held a door open for a woman who was coming into a bank or a store just behind me. And that was treated as insulting behavior by these feminists. I'm glad to say that hasn't happened for some time. But for a while it was commonplace. It was a deliberate contempt for mannerly behavior. When you go back and study Roman literature, you find that as the empire became particularly strong and decadent, the literary figures seemed to indulge in perpetual put-downs on everyone. Pornographic put-downs, very commonly. so that they resembled very much our comedians today, to whom humor is to try to degrade and embarrass someone. One of the things that I've heard said about manners was that just as a car without oil would see its motor burn up very quickly, so too a society without manners would see communication very quickly destroyed. And that's a comment I've never forgotten, because I think it sums up exactly what the function of manners is. This is why we have a divided society today. We have never in American history been a more divided society than we are now. One of the things that has helped the Christian school movement in this country is that the children learn manners. They not only are better educated, but they learn manners. In one of the most important court cases, going back into the 70s, was in a state where the law was very severe. This Christian school was not only going to be shut down, but the parents were told that if they resisted, they would have to come to court with their children's suitcases packed, because they would be taken from them at the conclusion of the hearing. The parents met and are about ready to give up and to pull their children out and to put them in the public schools. The resistance was created by the one non-Christian in the group, a father. And he said, "No way. My boy is calling me sir, and he's polite." And he said, "I never expected to see a boy in our community as courteous as he is, let alone mine." And he said, "I'm going to fight for that school." And all the Christians in the room were abashed and agreed to go along with it. And they fought and they won, and it was a landmark case, the Wisner case. And again, I have seen that parents who are non-Christian have been impressed by the school after being unwilling to put out the tuition, simply because of the difference the school made in their child's life. Earlier I referred to manners as the lubricating oil of society, that which makes life livable, community possible, because it establishes ground rules for human relationships. This is why community now has, to a great extent, broken down in many areas. There is no common courtesy, no sense of decent behavior. The result is that people are at odds with each other. They withdraw from one another. We have more people coming together to watch games and sporting events and that sort of thing, and far less activity that people share together. Courtesy has given way to hostility to anything less than perfection at every point. We have a highly imperfect society that is intolerant of imperfections in others. And I think that the lack of manners is responsible for.